in physio, there's a couple of areas of vestibular rehab that we can do, and so it depends on the problem. One of the things that we see is BPPV, which is benign positional vertigo, and that's where we've got outside the canals in your inner ear, there's a couple of gel plates, and inside those there's these calcium carbonate crystals that are embedded in those gel plates, and they can slough off and then roll into your balance centres, which are these semicircular canals just outside of that. And when that gets in there, it's like a ball bearing rolling around in a bike tube, and it's causing all sorts of trouble. So you can turn and these things are tumbling around in your head even though you've stopped turning, and it causes the brain to think that you're actually still moving, and that creates vertigo. So we can identify if that's your problem, we can identify that and clear that canal by getting that little crystal out of there. When it's out, that problem's cleared. Another part of vestibular rehab is if there's been damage to the nerve, like a viral infection to the nerve, which is conducting information from that balance mechanism in your ear to your brain. It's like someone's put a shovel through an optic fibre cable and the signal's no longer getting through. And so what we do there is we get the brain to retrain its perception of that part. So there can be some improvement in the nerve conductivity as well, but it's also about retraining the brain interpreting that information, which is different, and that's a more slow process that usually takes a few months to do. There's a couple of elements that kind of mesh in with vestibular rehab, like if you've had an episode of Meniere's disease, or you've had an acute episode of dizziness which is from a different cause and it hasn't resolved, then there's exercises we can get you to do, same as long as what I was saying before, to try and get the brain to reinterpret those signals and retrain it to try and normalise it, and it takes a bit of time. But in essence, that's probably what we do mostly in vestibular rehab. It's identifying that problem and then applying a formula of exercises to that to correct it. For us as physios, the key thing is that your dizziness and vertigo is movement induced. If you're getting it, or you're just sitting still, you haven't moved your head or neck, there's a good chance that it's a medical cause to that, and we can't help you with that. If you're getting as a result of movement, then it means that you're stimulating these nerves in your neck or inner ear, or you're rolling these crystals around in your inner ear, and there's actually a mechanical cause to that, and that's where we come into play. I mentioned neck then. Your neck can be a cause of dizzinesses as well, and vertigo. You've got little receptors in your neck which also interplay with balance, and so again, we've got the ability to test your neck out and see whether that's a contributing effect. But if you're getting dizziness and vertigo that's not movement induced, there's a good chance that there's a medical basis to that, and that needs to be seen by your GP first. Look, it's definitely more prevalent in the elderly, and I think the reality is that these little balance mechanisms in your inner ear, they've got little hair cells in there which are all healthy and working well when we're younger, but they actually die off and get thinner. They sort of, you almost go bald in there. You lose some of these hair cells, so your ability then to for that system to be working as well diminishes with time. And the chance of these little crystals tumbling off, building up and tumbling off the gel plates that they're embedded in is going to happen more likely in later age. Saying that, you can have a viral attack any time in life. You can pick up a virus and it can attack the nerve, any time in life. So that's not necessarily just an older person's things. Or you can have, I've treated young people who've been had trauma to the side of the head, and that's knocked these crystals free, and then they've gone into the wrong place and created vertigo. So you can actually get this at any stage in your life. But we'd probably, if you had a look at the statistics, it's probably something you do see later, more commonly, more later in life.
Okay.
I started getting interested in this years ago. I did a placement when I was at university, and the lady who was my supervisor there was brilliant at it, and this was her pet area. So, and we're only sort of starting to get to understand that 20 years ago and doing some research into it. But probably the last 10 years, there's been more and more research, more and more understanding in it. And so perhaps things that were diagnosed and just written off as more of a generic sort of diagnosis 10 years ago, we can now sort of nut out and say, no, that's a neuronitis or that is BPPV, and our ability to identify that, diagnose it, then have a treatment plan is just getting better and better. And that's born out of, it's not that it's just happening more in society, it's just that we're actually offering better solutions and diagnostics in identifying what we can do in those areas now. So having myself here, I've been doing it for probably 9 years or so now, and having Dave and Will both trained as well means that we're now attracting more and more referrals as a result of having that expertise here, and we can actually see more people and deal with it as a clinic, not just as an individual. So across the board, doctors know about us now, and as soon as someone has a positive outcome from these sort of treatments, they're so life debilitating, they're pretty quick to spread the word that something can be done about it. And I think as a rule, across the medical profession, it's getting identified better and better, and the appropriate and early referrals are coming in. I used to get some referrals where people have had BPPV for multiple years when it should be something we can clear in days. But we see less of that now, which is good. And that's just quicker identification, diagnosis, and then channeled into places like here that have got expertise in treating that problem. So look, the key thing is that we need to assess what is causing that vertigo, and whether that firstly is something that's benign and something we can deal with in rehab or in a physio setting, or if it's something that we need you to go and see your GP and neurologist or specialist about. And so you come in here, we do some tests. We're testing, depending on the problem, we're testing the inner ears and their response to movement. We're testing your balance reactions. We're having a look at what your eyes are doing once we stimulate your inner ear. And we come up with a hypothesis or a diagnosis. And on the back of that, depending on the problem, we'll then potentially do some manoeuvres to try and clear your inner ear from having these crystals rolling around, or we'll give you a series of exercises to try and retrain the brain's perception of that part, which may not be giving quite the right information to your brain as a result of a viral attack or damage to the nerve. And that is something that you generally go away with then and work at for a week or two. And once you've mastered that set of exercises, you come back in again. We re-prescribe a harder level, progress those, and then you go away and you work on those again. So it's like a rehabilitation program. You start with something that you can cope with. You get better at doing that, and as soon as you do, we then make it harder. And that can take, generally we expect to see not change on a daily basis in that circumstance, but certainly on a monthly basis we want to see improvements. And we do tests to rate your scores on that as well. And we see, okay, you're currently functioning here, and as a result of doing these exercises, we've now got you to here. And it'll take you several months to get an improvement in that instance. Our balance is controlled by basically 3 different systems, and that's our joint receptors. There's little receptors in all our joints which tell us where we are in space. If you shut your eyes, you know where your hand is, and that's those little receptors telling you where it is. It's called proprioception. You've got your inner ear, and so this is a very complex little balance mechanism, and there's one on either side of your head, and they work pretty much equal and opposite. So when you turn to your right, you stimulate your right one, and your left one's getting stimulated or inhibited exactly on the opposite side. So it's a really finely tuned system. And then you've got your eyes as well. Okay, so when we're assessing someone, we're evaluating how are all those systems working and how are they all working together, because they need to integrate to have good balance. And usually when someone loses, I know we're talking about dizziness and vertigo, but you can also have a lot of imbalance and loss of balance with disorders of the vestibular system. And so if we're getting the inner ear and the eyes not working well together, or the joint receptors aren't working well in your legs, you're going to have one of the other systems that has to be picking up and working harder to compensate for that loss. And so if your vision's no good, you're now relying on your inner ear and your joint receptors to tell you where you are in space. And so, hand in hand with what we do, we want to make sure your eyes are good. So, having your eyes checked is really important for balance. Giving you exercises for balance through your joint receptors, standing on one leg, for example, and really challenging those systems and getting your balance, your joint receptor systems working as sharply as we can is another really important tool for improving balance and movement disorder as well. So it's not just all about just working the in-ear apparatus, it's also making sure these other systems, and there's generally, like I said, 3 main systems, make sure they're all working well and integrating together as well. And there's exercises we can do which challenges all 3 of those things at once to make sure they're working. For example, standing on one leg and throwing a ball in the air and catching it in the other hand. You're having to track it with your eyes, having to balance with your joint receptors, and you're also moving your head, tracking that ball. And so all those systems are working. And so understanding that balance system and where failures can occur in it gives us opportunity to then rehabilitate where those deficits are. Look, most people have had vertigo, their natural strategy is to stop moving because it's usually the case if you've got vertigo, more often than not, movement induces it, so most people just stay still. And what happens then is their neck gets really stiff and sore. They generally withdraw from society, they don't go out and do as many things. So in terms of what you can do at home, the best thing is to get on to your doctor or your physio and get it assessed, because you don't want to be in that state because you decondition and you get stiff really quickly. So from my point of view, if you've been diagnosed and you've been given your set of tools by your physio, then you've got what you need to do at home. But if you haven't seen them, chances are you're not going to be moving as well. You're going to be pretty miserable, and you just get progressively weaker and less fit, and your neck gets stiffer. So the best thing you can do at home is to take action, get in and see a health professional, and get the right advice and get your program started or on the right track to some resolution on that. Heaps.
Yeah.
No, it works really well. And again, the research is really clear cut. If you do a generic balance program, you can get some improvement. But if you do a program that has been tailor-made to you, based on the deficits that have been seen within an assessment that we do here, your outcomes are much, much better. So your improvement really comes from having that tailor-made, individualised program rather than just a generic program. That's where that clinical experience in clinical program comes into it, rather than doing a generic class or just a general exercise routine.